host. On behalf of the GodCast ministry team and the Meadowbridge Seventh-day Adventist Church, welcome and thank you for joining us to this episode of GodCast, How to Life with God. In our last episode, we continued our series on forgiveness, specifically within families. And we discussed how hard it was, and our participants shared openly and transparently about their own experiences with needing to be forgiven as well as forgiving others. As we continue the conversation in part 2, we will see that forgiveness looks differently in different situations and different families, and we're not able to judge that. But the most important part is that we make the decision to forgive so that we can move on. So let's resume our conversation with Lee, Carla, Mark, Amaris, and Sierra.
Parents verbal abuse their kids. I was verbally abused by my mom. And a lot of times that she would say things, it would hurt, and I'd be so mad I wanted to respond back to her. But I know if I did, it would be the worst thing in the world for me if I did that. So at an early age, I learned how to just, while she is saying those things, and just go someplace else in my mind and I not hear it. But I had purpose in my heart, if I ever had kids, that I would never verbally abuse my kids like that. Because I would never want them to think that I didn't love them. And when parents verbally abuse their kids, to me, it was a lack of love and affection and compassion there. And so I was thinking to myself, if they were brought up like that, is that the only type of love that they know to give their children, even though it's the wrong type of love?
That's all I know.
And I was growing up, I never heard my mother say, "I love you." And that was one thing I said, when I had kids, that was one thing they were gonna always hear, "I love you." Never leave home without giving each other a kiss, because you never know when you may not see each other again.
Right.
And so I think that was one of the greatest things that I had to forgive my mother for, was verbal abuse.
Right.
She would just verbally abuse you for anything. And no matter what she was going through, she could always find a kid to lay it on, to make her feel better, I think. But I said that maybe that's all she knew, and that's how she brought us up. But I learned early that's not the type of mom that I wanted to be.
I think that's what comes down to the root of the family forgiveness. I think sometimes we go into generational patterns, and I very much think that I even look at my own grandmother, and I think that maybe she herself did not experience God's love through her parents, and I think that caused her to not know how to give love herself, let alone receive it. And I think that sometimes we don't realize that we set ourselves up for a situation where it will be hard to have family forgiveness because we haven't dealt with those issues, or even told our own kids, "I'm sorry. I didn't know how because this is what happened to me." But I think about my grandmother's generation, it would be extremely unheard of and taboo to say something is wrong, or I'm hurt, or to even apologize, which is where I sometimes go back to. Unfortunately, sometimes I think that scripture, sometimes not all the time, could be manipulated, because I have even had a parent say to me, "Well, I'm the parent, I don't have to apologize to you." And you can either do what you did, Miss Lee, and you learn what not to do, and you change the generational pattern, and you set yourself up for family forgiveness, or you might make a decision that unfortunately my grandmother made, and you continue that generational pattern, and then that down the line, over and over again, you're going to be put in a position where forgiveness has to take place, and if it doesn't, it can really, really make it extremely hard for reconciliation.
Right.
Because it's just like deeply rooted and it's just repeating and repeating. And I think sometimes that's what forgiveness comes down to, is a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, with my mom, I was living in Virginia, she was living in North Carolina. And I would still go every other weekend to visit her, even though I knew what I was going to encounter when I got there. And but I just kept ignoring her and loving her, because I just said, well, she's my mom. If I don't love her, I won't have a mom, you know. So at least I guess abusive mom is better than no mom at all. And so what happened is, down through the years, if I kept doing that, and I called her one Thursday, I think it was, and told her I was coming down for the weekend. And for once in her life, she said, well, I know you like fish and collard greens and cornbread. You want me to fix some for you? And I said, well, that'll be great. She said, what time do you expect to be here? I said, around 6 o'clock. When I pulled up in the yard, I could smell the aroma of the food. So that's when I knew that she was sort of like coming around, but it was only because of my persistence.
Right. I think that reflects what Mark was saying earlier, that you still can make a choice to honor,
Right.
even in difficult situations. But I want to transition a little bit, and you may not be able to respond to this one, but spouses. They are part of your family, whether they are current spouses or former spouses. And so how do you forgive in those difficult situations, Carla?
When you started talking, I was thinking, and since the beginning, I think I said you have to accept the other person. And I went through a situation where I 100% I still believe that's all he knew. That's how he showed love. So it was really hard, but you either accept it and stay, or you accept it and leave. Because at this age, are you gonna change them unless they want to? So it's hard as an adult do that. It's hard because not only am I an adult, I'm a parent. I don't want my kids to learn that. And back to what you were saying, which is a little off track, if I want my kids to honor me as a mother, because I want them to follow that commandment, I want to teach them that it's okay to say I'm sorry. And I have apologized to my son. I have apologized to my daughter for things that I'm like, I tell them like, I told you blah, blah, blah. We go through the whole thing, and then it's like, they let me talk, and they're like, this is what happened. I was like, I am so sorry. I didn't listen to you. We talk, we're good, we hug, I love you, and we're good. But we have to also teach them that when it comes to a spouse, it's not only your spouse. If you have a family, you have to think about the children, and that's your priority, because God chose you to give those kids to you. Why? I really don't care, but he chose me, so that means that I'm the best mom for my 2 kids. And it's gonna have to work. He doesn't make mistakes. So you have to think about the kids as well, and make sure that they are okay. And again, it's only with God. You cannot do it yourself.
Of course, that has been abused also, just as the 5th commandment has been abused, so as do not put us under what God has joined together. That's been abused and taken as a ticket to a blank check.
But sometimes you do it to yourself as well. Sometimes the spouse will abuse it because that person knows that I know you have to do as I say, but sometimes we do it to ourselves because I believe that that's what I need to do. And so, it goes both ways.
You internalize the abuse, in other words.
Yeah, so whether you accept understand, believe, put it anyway. Whether you accept that person, you are putting yourself in that situation by choice as well. I mean, it's easier said than done,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I mean, for personal experience, I wanted to be there because you think that it's better to help from the inside. So
I understand.
That reason, I'm not sure I'm following what you're saying. Are you saying that you're in a good situation or a bad
I
situation?
was in a bad situation.
You were in a bad situation.
She's saying she put herself in that bad situation.
Right.
Well,
And then-
you
Because
choose
you-
to stay.
you
Yeah, you choose to
understand
stay
that,
because
yeah.
you think that, or
I
I
think
thought
that's-
that I could help from the inside, but there were 5 kids involved. I mean,
Right.
I don't want that for any of them.
Right,
So-
but that can be a negative thing where you do not make the decisions that need to be made.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
But-
And that comes with forgiving myself for not only putting myself in that situation, but I have 2 kids that depend on me, for putting them in that situation.
Mhm.
That is
Right.
the hardest part.
Yeah.
Because we're adults, we're fine, we'll be fine, whether it's true or not. But, you have these 2 little ones that, again, God gave them to you to take care of. And that was hard to forgive myself.
Right.
Whether I knew or not, whether it was on purpose or not, that's not,
Right.
it doesn't even come down to that.
It is.
It
what
happened,
Right.
yeah, so.
But with me, when I got married, with my spouses, we were both worldly people. Neither one of us was in the church. So, but once we had the first child, I started going to church because I wanted to make sure that the kids knew Christ and brought up in the church. So that sort of like put a distance between the 2 of us because I wanted to go to church and he didn't. And then when I came to the Seventh-day Adventist church, I mean, that distance got even wider. And so it came to the point that we was talking, I was coming to church on Sabbath and Wednesday nights and all like that. And so, and anything else I go to church. So what he said to me, he wanted me to do something with him on Saturday. I said, well, you have to wait until after the Sabbath. And he said, I'm supposed to be first. So I said, no, God is first and you second. So he said, well, I don't play second fiddle to anybody. So I had to make a choice, him or God. So I chose God. And so we decided to split. So he didn't want a divorce. So I said, well, you know what? Since you don't want a divorce, I said, well, you can go do whatever you want to do. I said, well, I'll give you 7 years to see if you want your family. And during those 7 years, he never wanted to reconcile. So in the 7-year period, I filed for divorce. That was when he wanted to reconcile. So I says no. He said, this is what he said. He says, well, you're supposed to be a Christian and you're supposed to forgive me. So I said, well, I do forgive you, but I don't have to be married to you.
I want to go back to what you said earlier. This gentleman in your family said, God told me. And what the Holy Spirit has been blamed for.
And even Satan.
Yeah, true.
Right.
True.
Because if God wants us to know stuff, He can communicate that to us as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think in marriage relationships, similar to parental relationships, it's a 2-way street. We speak about forgiving others as though we're being wronged, and yet I'm sure our spouses could say the same thing. So where's the equity in that? If you had 2 separate conversations, each one is saying that I've been wronged. So there's a disconnect somewhere. So am I hurting my spouse? So at the risk of trying to sound wise here, I'm going to quote Confucius.
All right, go
He
for
said,
it.
he said, I'm not sad because people don't understand me. I'm sad because I don't understand people. So.
Okay. Well, I do think that it's important that, And I think you all have done a great job of kind of looking at forgiveness from both sides, from being wronged, but also having wronged other people. And I do think that that's an important thing, because at the end of the day, we really can only change ourselves.
Yeah.
And there are gonna be people who, no matter what, they're just gonna be whoever they are. And we can decide to accept it, or we can decide to be mad about it. And that's a choice. And then there are people who, because we persevere and persist and we just love them and honor them, whether that's a parent or a sibling or a spouse, or a child, because sometimes it's the opposite, it's the children that are hurting parents, you know?
Absolutely.
That we persist, and that person is drawn in, really, I would say not by our love, but by the love of Christ. I think that's what draws. And then you have other situations where you just gut it out, and then God is changing that person, and he's like, I need you to stay, I need you to stay, I need you to stay, because this is a commitment that you made to me. This is a covenant, especially when we're talking about marriage, a covenant, and I got this, okay? And then you, day by day, you can see those things. You talked about, you know, it's not always a massive change. There's this book that I love that I've been recommending to people all year long called Atomic Habits, and it's by James Clear. And he talks about how if we make one change every day, it just seems so incremental, like you just, not a different change, but if we do something every day, it's just like, I go to the gym one day, obviously I'm not gonna lose 20 pounds, but at the end of the year, you've changed 37%. And so it's like, that's huge. You know, when you think about that, when you're just one day at a time, you're making a change. And so that change could be whatever you did to wrong that person, could be part of your character that you're like, I need to change one every day. I need to make a decision every day. But it also could be that that person, I need to change how I respond to that person, you know, and so that I don't have bitterness and anger. Because ultimately, that's what forgiveness is really about.
Right.
When we're on this side of the fence, it's that how can the Holy Spirit work effectively through you when you're walking around with bitterness and anger and grudge and all of these things? He can't. And that's what we are trying to, like, lifing with God is about dealing with the hard stuff. It's not all pretty and beautiful and perfect. When you get to heaven, that will be, but we're not there yet.
But don't you find out that's one thing that people don't want to deal with is the hard stuff?
And that's why part of what we want to do here is show that there will be hard stuff no matter what your situation is.
Right.
But when you do it with God, it's a whole different deal.
It's
It's peace, it's joy. I mean, because you can see people who've been hurt, who've been abused, and they can still honor. They can still use that to teach somebody else or help other people. They can use that. And so forgiveness is almost the venue through which we're able to have the Holy Spirit use that for other good, for other purposes.
And you have to remember also too that Christ says, if we don't forgive, our Heavenly Father will not forgive us.
Right.
Now, how many of us sitting here don't want to be forgiven?
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And the amazing thing is that he's so gracious and merciful that even when we don't forgive, he still gives us that grace and mercy, you know. And I think it's kind of like what you said, Carla. We need to just be careful that we aren't abusing the grace and mercy that we do. Actually, not just say we forgive, but make that choice to forgive. And it can be very, very hard to walk out. But I agree with you, Ms. Lorraine, that God will make it possible for us to walk out that choice to forgive.
Spousal abuse, I think we as women accept more spousal abuse than we should because of the children. I grew up in a dysfunctional family, plus I was brought up in a broken family, mother, no father in the home. And I didn't want my kids to grow up without a father because I went through all that abuse trying to protect them, but it still didn't work because once your husband realized that he can do these things and you're going to accept it, it don't get better, it escalates. And you have to decide at one point, whether you're going to continue or stop. So one morning I got up and I said to God, you know, you just gonna have to punish me, but I'm not I can't take this anymore. So I packed his clothes and put them out. And I've been blessed ever since.
I think I probably can speak to a different side of that spectrum because, well, I grew up in a home with my two parents, and they actually had a period of separation, and they were actually about to divorce, but this year they made 33 years, and my dad did change, and so sometimes I don't think that it has to be something where the man does not ever change and it would just escalate, but I think that it all comes down to if he wants to change, and if he's sincere and he will allow God to do the working in him, but also work his faith, because you can't say, okay, God, I want to change, but then you go right back to doing what you were doing. You can, you tell God you want to change, you need to actually change, and you might have to change your number, cut off some of your used to be so-called friends. You might have to change the things that you're doing and form some new, better habits. But then I think even for my own marriage, we had experienced some very difficult seasons, and I made the choice to stay because for me, that's what God instructed me to do. And I'm sure people think that I'm crazy. I'm sure people think that God did not tell me to do that, but I can say that I've been blessed ever since, and I've seen my own husband change more and more as time goes on. Now, it doesn't mean that it's been easy, because it has been extremely hard, but one thing God said to me was that we have to be careful when we say that we love someone, because we're going to have to learn to love the way that God does. And God literally loves us regardless, in spite of any time, however, whenever we pick God up, we put him down. We use him when it's convenient. God plainly spoke to me and said, I'm showing you my love. I'm letting you see what it is to love like me, because we like to say church cliches, I love you, I love you, I love you. The Jesus in me loves the Jesus in you, but do we really? And so that doesn't mean that everyone has to stay and take things, but we have to really, speaking of cliches, literally count up the cost when we decide to make a commitment to love someone, because that's what we've done. We've made a commitment to love, and it's easy to put our own stamp on love, but if we actually read 1 Corinthians 13, that's a hard thing.
Right.
That kind of love, and sometimes we look at it like if someone loves me, that's what they should do, but all the while, Paul was talking to us, and we need to put our own name in that scripture. And speaking of Paul, I think about how he says to him, he says that he had to die daily. And I think that if you want to forgive your spouse, mother, sister, brother, friend, cousin, whomever, just as you said, Amaris and Carlet, you're going to have to be humble, which is exactly what Paul was saying when he said, I die daily. And forgiveness definitely will require you to die daily. But I also do agree that at a certain point, God is not going to call you to be abused. And so if you don't see changes within your spouse, most definitely, you have to go to God and say, listen, how much more do you want me to take? But if you do see changes, I still go to God and say, listen, I need you to give me strength and help me to celebrate the small beginnings and not always look for where's the major change. But as one day becomes 2 days, 2 days becomes a week becomes 3 weeks, 3 weeks becomes a month, so you just have to, someone else said it, you really have to rely on God so heavily when you decide to forgive.
Back to I think at the beginning when we started the conversation, you were talking about God gave us his son. So with what you were saying, it just came to my mind. So I'm gonna forgive you for something that you just did to me. God gave us his son for something that nobody knew somebody was going to do. And he did it. So that's I cannot even imagine what went through his head, especially as being parents. I cannot imagine that. So we have to, no, it's not easy. We have to work on that. But if you compare that forgiveness and merciful, how merciful he is, to, yes, a lot of times there are things that are done to us that are wrong, but there are also things that are small.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna choose not to forgive you.
Yes.
So it just doesn't,
Right.
it doesn't match.
Right.
It just doesn't go together. So.
But when I think about giving up one of my kids, I just think how merciful God was that he could forgive his son. And then on the cross, he had to turn his back on him because he was bearing all of our sin. And sin can't stand in the presence of God. So that's when he cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Because that separation was there because he had the weight of all of our sins upon him. When I think about, could I give up one of my kids?
No,
Absolutely
not.
not.
It's not.
No, it's what I'm
It's
saying.
only
It's-
godly.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It's-
saying, but it would be
it's-
so difficult because you read in the Bible, a lot of parents sacrifice their kids to the god Moloch. I can imagine that. I can toss my kid in
Well,
the
that's-
fire. But I just say,
We're not gonna go there.
but I'm just saying the
No.
forgiveness,
Right.
what Christ did to forgive us.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we should have if we are Christians, we should have enough God in us to forgive and not hold grudges against anyone like her.
Yeah.
Well, I think that when we put into context what God has done for us and what he continues to forgive us of,
Yeah.
and we really want to be free. Because those are two things, like knowing that we need forgiveness daily, but then we also want to be free and have joy and peace. You can't do that if you're carrying around your own sins and then if you're mad about somebody else's. So we need his forgiveness and we need to forgive. So I just want to say thank you very much to you all for sharing, for opening up, for giving us a picture into your own experience, but also I believe a picture from which God has led you to be where you are and thinking about forgiveness and forbearance and how we interact with those that we love. We know that we can be hurt most deeply by the people that we love most deeply, but that just inspires, that love should inspire us to forgive more freely. So thank you all. And thank you. Thank you again for joining us. And so now I want to ask you this question. If you were sitting face to face with someone, a friend, a coworker, a church member, and they were struggling with unforgiveness and bitterness, what would you say to them? One thing to help them try to move forward.
First, if I was talking to someone that had a lot of bitterness and unforgiveness in their heart, the first thing I would ask them is, how would you want to be forgiven? How would you want to be that person that anger, animosity, and bitterness is directed to? As a person that had once been in a situation where I did not have a forgiving spirit, I suggest that you would pray and ask God to give you a forgiving spirit, because those spirits just don't come natural. It's something you have to pray for. And then Ask yourself, do I need to forgive someone for something I've done or said to them? And search your heart, examine yourself, and I believe that God will direct you in the direction that you need to go in.
It's important that you acknowledge that your feelings are valid and they deserve to be acknowledged. But not only because your feelings matter, but because that God knows that your feelings matter. And I think that's why God is always the person that you can go and speak to whenever you're scared of being judged or looked at differently. God will never judge you in a way that you can't talk to him again, for one. So I think you should consider, when you're trying to consider how or if you should forgive this person, think, what would God do? How would God address the situation? And pray to God that he'll give you the strength to deal with the situation properly.
If I have somebody in front of me that needs to work on an issue with somebody, family or coworker, three things. Prayer, a lot of prayer. Only God can tell you which way to go. One thing that I have learned is I'm the type of person that I would want to talk about it, but not everybody is ready to talk about it. And you have to put yourself in their position and talk to them in a way that they will accept your words, because it will come from your heart. So it's a lot of prayer, and probably will take more time than you would like, but God will certainly tell you when that person is ready and when you will be ready.
Every situation's different, so I can't really advise you what to do with whatever you're facing. But I can just say from my own life that looking at Jesus has been the thing that has freed me to move forward. At least I want to move forward. And that's more than I can say. Before I knew him, I wasn't moving forward at all. So, as some have mentioned, prayer, and sometimes the situation just takes time. Maybe now isn't the time. But I think in most of the situations that are important in our lives, God will make a time where it'll come to some kind of satisfactory resolution. So I'm thankful for that.
I think that if you are looking for some ways to move forward with unresolved issues in your family, I would start with journaling. I think that having some quiet time every day to yourself, to write, to also get in prayer and talk to God, and even understand that there is a listening side to prayer. Let God download some things into you, and you could even add that to your journal entries. Also, write down some scriptures that encourage you, and write down your pure and raw thoughts. I believe that is a good way for you to get started with moving forward.
Forgiveness in families deserved its own episode, because we realized that the people that we love the most and need the most can also hurt us the most. And that makes forgiveness even more complex. We struggle with how someone so close and so significant in our life can hurt us so. And that makes forgiveness really hard. But then the other thing is, because they're so close and so significant in our life, we have to forgive so that the relationship can continue. But how do we do that? We know the Bible has a prescription for that, and we talked about that in our first episode of this series on forgiveness. But what if the Bible doesn't have authority in your life yet? You may be asking, if I'm not a Christian, why should I forgive? Here are 3 reasons. Forgiveness brings freedom. As much as for the forgiver as the forgiven. You may think you enjoy carrying that grudge around, but really it just weighs you down and hinders your ability to enjoy life and be joyful. It also causes you to build walls between you and other people because you fear being hurt again. If you want to live free, if you want to enjoy life and relationships, if you want to just put the weight down, forgive. Forgiveness brings salvation, not from sin, only Jesus Christ can do that, but it saves marriages, friendships, parent-child relationships, siblings, etc. If you don't want to lose a relationship that really matters to you and that you've spent years building just because of one wrong that was done, forgive. And forgiveness brings healing. When you choose to forgive, you make a conscious decision to stop rehearsing the wrong that was done, to stop trying to figure out why it was done, and to stop letting that wrong control your emotions. If you want to be whole again, forgive. If you want to be free, if you want to save a relationship that matters, if you just want to be healed, make the decision to forgive. And if you want someone to walk with you through that process, email us at mbsda.godcast@gmail.com, and someone from the ministry team will connect with you. Thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the notification bell, like and share with someone who also wants to be free, be saved, and be healed. And of course, join us next time when we will ask more questions and seek more answers as we continue moving Godward.